My name is Brian Langston now. He said it loud, on purpose, right as I was finishing a short toast about how proud I was to be his father. And for a second, just one, I forgot how to hold my face. The backyard went completely still. Everyone heard it. Plastic forks froze midair. My sister's hand didn't make it to her wine glass. Even the Bluetooth speaker cut out, like the universe had better timing than the DJ. Jessica, my ex-wife, covered her mouth with that little smirk she uses when pretending to be surprised. "Oh, honey," she cooed to Brian. "Are you sure you want to tell him now?" Her new husband, Chad, of course it's Chad, wrapped an arm around Brian's shoulder and raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, grinning like he just pissed on a tree. I looked at my son, 17, taller than me now. Same jawline, same twitch under his left eye when he's bluffing. I used to know what he was thinking before he even opened his mouth. Now, he didn't even flinch as he said it again, slower this time. "I'm taking my new dad's name." I nodded. Just once. No sarcasm. No yelling. Just a long, steady breath as I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Okay," I said, quiet enough that Chad leaned in. "Then we just need to formalize it." Brian blinked. "What?" I handed him the envelope. "It's already prepared. Change of name declaration. Pre-witnessed. Notarized. You can sign it now. It'll take effect immediately." He opened the envelope and looked at the form. I watched his fingers hesitate. For a split second, he looked up at me like he was about to ask something, but then he saw Chad watching, and his posture stiffened. He grabbed the pen off the table and signed it with a flourish. Jessica clapped. "Oh my God, we should frame this." Someone let out a whistle. I think it was her cousin Todd, the one who sells fake leather belts on Etsy and thinks sarcasm is a personality. They all thought this was some ceremonial torch passing. A social media moment. A gotcha. Brian choosing his real family. But I was the one who brought the form. I knew exactly what it meant. It wasn't just symbolic. It was legal, permanent, binding, and it would detonate everything they thought they'd secured. By the way, if you've listened this far, and I know more than 90% of you aren't subscribed, hit that button. It keeps our team going, and, trust me, the next parts? You won't want to miss what comes after this signature. Back to that moment. Brian signing wasn't just a rejection. It was activation. Because buried in the fine print of our post-divorce financial arrangement was Clause 14D. Dormant, untouched, collecting digital dust since the day we split. A clause only I could invoke. A clause that states any voluntary surname change by a direct descendant severs bloodline-based inheritance claims and reverts all associated oversight to a secondary trustee. That clause had one requirement: written and notarized consent by the heir. And he just gave it to me. Jessica didn't notice. She was too busy showing off Brian's signature to Chad's parents, who looked like they'd just won a prize pig at the county fair. They were laughing, sipping from their monogrammed wine glasses, playing house in the ruins of a life I built from scratch. And me? I just sat down, adjusted my cuffs, and took a bite of cake. Red velvet. Jessica's favorite. She used to say I didn't know how to let go. But that afternoon, I let go of everything they thought still tied me to them. Brian didn't just sign away my name. He signed away the legacy that came with it. And I wasn't angry. No, I was finally in motion. And they had no idea. That night, the party footage was already spreading online, Brian's declaration clipped and reposted by half the backyard. My new dad. Overlaid with clapping emojis and champagne gifts. I watched it in silence, the glow of my laptop reflecting off the kitchen tile. They even added soft music underneath, some knockoff Coldplay track. But I wasn't watching the clip for sentiment. I needed timestamps. Because that signature Brian gave, the ink wasn't even dry, and I was already pulling up the digital vault I had created 5 years earlier, hidden behind layers of encryption and dated legalese so boring even Jessica never bothered to dig. Clause 14D had sat dormant since the ink dried on our settlement agreement. A clause of my own design, slipped into the trust's supplemental governance structure, buried so deep in the appendix it looked like a formatting error. I drafted it with a corporate law firm in Zurich that specialized in legacy bifurcation cases. At the time, it felt like overkill. Now it felt like prophecy. I clicked through the trustee dashboard. There it was. Clause 14, voluntary name disassociation. In the event that a direct heir of the settlor formally renounces or changes their surname to that of a non-genetic relation, the individual's status as named heir shall be voided. Trustee authority shall revert to alternate appointee listed in Schedule 3C. Asset oversight to be redirected within 7 business days. All guardian-level access to be reviewed for removal. Brian's signature was all I needed. It didn't matter whether he understood what it meant. That's the beauty of legal foresight. The contract doesn't care if you regret it later. It only cares if you signed it. I picked up the phone and dialed the private line to the trust administrator, Michael Adler. Sharp, quiet, discreet. The kind of guy who speaks like every word is evidence. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Bennett, I'm activating Clause 14D, I said. Silence. Then a soft exhale on the other end. It's live? You're sure? He signed. Publicly. It's time-stamped, recorded, witnessed, and notarized. I have the video and the pen. Understood. A pause. Do you want to confirm the new trustee assignment before I initiate the rollback? No need, I said. It's already done. I heard the faint tap of keys in the background. A log being updated. A lineage being revised. Adler spoke again. You know this removes him from the beneficiary schedule permanently, barring judicial override, including educational, medical, and real property entitlements. I know exactly what it does. And the Guardian comms access for Jessica? Expired. Immediately. Very well, Adler said. A formal confirmation will be sent to all listed parties by end of day. I'll mark this as activated and irreversible. Good. As I hung up, the weight didn't feel like revenge. It felt like relief. Clean, precise, surgical. Jessica spent years trying to chip away at the structure I built. Little whispers to Brian about who really cared, who really showed up. She was patient, I'll give her that. She didn't torch bridges. She just replaced them with prettier ones, plated in gold, leading nowhere. But she never understood how much of my silence was by design. She thought it meant weakness, disinterest. It meant preparation. I poured a drink. Neat bourbon. Same glass I used the night I moved out after the divorce. I remember her last words that day. You'll regret walking away. I didn't. And tonight, neither would the trust. She wanted to rewrite our story with her new husband's name at the center. Fine. But legacies aren't made with hashtags and champagne toasts. They're built in ink. Clause 14D wasn't revenge. It was a correction. And it was just beginning. 3 days. That's how long it took for the ripple to reach them. Quiet, clean, without so much as a splash. The trust doesn't operate like a credit card company. No flashy fraud alerts. No blinking warnings. Just surgical edits to a system they never really understood. The email Jessica received at 6:14 a.m. on a Tuesday morning had no subject line drama. Just the words, notification of oversight change, trust code, Bennett/1926/BREDU. She skimmed it while half awake, still in bed beside Chad, who was scrolling his phone looking for new patio furniture. She rolled her eyes when she saw the sender. God, more marked paperwork. Just archive it, Chad muttered. She almost did. But curiosity won. She tapped the email open, yawning. The first few lines were standard. This is an automated notification regarding recent administrative updates made to the Bennett Educational Trust. Status of named heir, Brian Bennett, revised. Effective immediately. Oversight transition initiated. She blinked. Sat up a little straighter. What the hell was that supposed to mean? She scrolled. The interface was old school. No frills. Just a legal chart showing the new designation beside the old one, where it once said, Primary Beneficiary, Brian Bennett, Heir, Verified Lineage. Guardian Access, Jessica Langston, Mother, Authorized Cosigner. It now read, Beneficiary Status, Removed, Voluntary Clause Triggered. Guardian Access, Revoked. Trustee Oversight, Assigned to Alternate, per Clause 14D. She stared at the word revoked for several seconds. The font was Helvetica. It wasn't even bolded. Just sitting there. Casual. Brutal. She tapped the login link at the bottom of the page, instinctively trying to access the dashboard she hadn't needed in months. The page loaded. Login credentials expired. She tried again. New password. Forgot password. Recovery email. Nothing. Even the backup access through Brian's education liaison account bounced back with no active profile associated with your contact information. She felt a small flicker of panic. A very specific kind. Not yet an emergency, but just shy of it. That sinking breath you take when your debit card gets declined and you know there's money in the account. She pulled up her email archive and searched for the trustee contact. Found the last one from 6 months ago, a quarterly statement summary. She tapped the contact icon. No longer valid. The phone number was disconnected. She checked her messages to Brian. Nothing recent. He'd been quiet since the brunch, but she figured he was just adjusting to the new school semester. Jessica stood up and went to the kitchen, barefoot, scrolling like a woman trying to track a ghost. She finally opened a group chat. Her, Chad, and Brian. Hey, sweetie, do you know why I got a weird notice from the trust people? No reply. Chad walked in, sipping coffee. Something wrong. She shoved the phone toward him. Does this look normal to you? He read for a few seconds, squinting. Removed? Wait, what is Clause 14D? She didn't answer, mostly because she had no clue. She'd never seen it in any of the summaries. Mark must have buried it. She scrolled back to the original email. At the bottom, beneath the signature line, was a note. Please note that changes were executed in accordance with the irrevocable stipulations outlined in the final divorce agreement. Per Schedule Appendix 3C, oversight has been transferred in full. Appendix 3C? Jessica suddenly remembered something. Years ago, right after the divorce, Mark had refused to let her have an editable copy of the estate documents. He insisted on PDF only. She thought it was petty. She laughed about it with her friends over wine. Men and their little control moves, she'd said. Now, that locked file felt less like pettiness and more like a sealed vault with a countdown. She opened her downloads folder and found the file. There it was, Bennett_final_trust_v9.pdf. She searched for 3C. Found it. Schedule Appendix 3C, alternate trustee assignment. In the event Clause 14D is triggered by voluntary heir disassociation, all oversight and future decisions shall be assigned to. Then a name she hadn't seen in over a decade. Jessica went cold. Because she knew that name. She'd buried it once. But Mark didn't. He'd filed it. And now it was rising again. Quietly. Legally. The post went up at 7:08 p.m. on a Thursday. A photo, Brian in his new basketball jersey, the name Langston stitched across the shoulders in block letters like it had always been there. He was mid-laugh, holding a game ball, with Chad crouching beside him like some awkward assistant coach who thinks fatherhood is earned through matching windbreakers and sideline high fives. Caption: feels good to leave behind the old name and take on the one that actually means something. 2 likes in the first 10 seconds. One of them from Jessica, the other from Chad's mother, who once gifted Brian a children's book titled How to Forgive Your Biological Father. By 7:13, Jessica added her comment. So proud of our real family blue heart, #new beginnings, #legacy made not given. Not inherited, Jessica? Interesting choice of phrasing. At 7:15, the post was shared by Chad himself, tagged with a glowing review of blended family success. He wrote about how proud he was to earn Brian's trust, how love is thicker than blood, and how the name you choose defines the man you'll become. There were 74 likes by the time Mark opened the post on his laptop. He didn't click or comment, didn't even react. He just clicked save, then converted the screenshot to PDF, filed it under the trust's document repository. Label, intent_abandonment_public_statement.pdf. He pulled up the estate software dashboard and attached the file to Brian's updated record. Under supporting documentation, there was now sign name change form, brunch video clip, witness log, public declaration of disassociation, URL plus PDF. In a family trust, language matters. So does intent. The average person thinks of abandonment as an emotional act, some dramatic door slam, some voicemail rant. But in legacy law, abandonment has teeth. It's not about drama. It's about documentation, voluntary statements, intentional acts, public dissociation from name, lineage, identity. That post. It was gold. Mark didn't even have to say a word. Jessica handed him the bullet and smiled as he loaded the chamber. A few minutes later, Mark received an automated alert from the trustee portal. The system had logged the attached evidence and queued it for administrative review. Under Notes, Elise Carrington had written a single sentence. Post confirms narrative disassociation and supports irreversible beneficiary adjustment under 14D. Will include in trust audit summary. Clean. Cold. Bulletproof. Jessica thought hashtags and filters could rebrand their family dynamic. She didn't realize she was etching it into stone. By 7:26 p.m., the post had over 100 likes. Distant relatives, Jessica's yoga instructor, Chad's co-workers. One of them commented, "So proud of you all. What a brave step, Brian." Brave maybe, but not free. Because when Brian changed his name, he didn't just change a word on paper. He changed which side of the vault he stood on. And with every like, every comment, every digital breadcrumb of mockery, they weren't just celebrating. They were giving Mark everything he needed. He didn't reply, didn't gloat, just closed the browser and opened the next folder on his desktop. A scanned letter, dated years ago, from Jessica's old HR department. addressed to a man named Malcolm. He read it once, then moved it into a folder labeled Trustee Material, Relevance, Pending, because there was more coming. This wasn't a custody fight. This wasn't about who bought cleats or paid for orthodontics. This was about legacy, and Jessica just posted herself out of it. The envelope arrived with a little red sticker that read, Action Required. Brian almost tossed it in the recycling pile with the rest of the mail, college pamphlets, promo codes from smoothie places he never visits, something from Chad's gym. But the logo caught his eye. Embossed, navy and gold. St. Lowell Academy, Financial Office. He tore it open at the kitchen counter while chewing on a granola bar. Inside, one thin sheet of paper. No greeting. No friendly salutation. Just a formal header and a line that hit harder than any lecture his mother ever gave him. We are currently reviewing the status of your legacy-based educational grant due to a recent change in legal heir classification. He read it twice. Then again. Mom, he called. Jessica was in the sunroom, legs tucked under her, flipping through some home design magazine. She looked up, annoyed. What? He walked in holding the letter. They're reviewing my scholarship. She squinted, took the paper, and skimmed it. Her brows tightened. What the hell does legal heir classification mean? Before he could answer, she was already dialing. St. Lowell had a direct parent liaison line. Jessica didn't wait for the auto menu. This is Jessica Langston, she snapped when a voice picked up. My son, Brian Bennett. Langston, just received a notice that his scholarship is under review? There was a pause on the other end. Then, yes, Mrs. Langston. We were informed of the update in his beneficiary status via our trust liaison. Update? What update? He still goes here. He's still an A student. His GPA hasn't changed. It's not academic. The voice replied, calm and apologetic. The grant is connected to a legacy trust. Funding criteria are tied to both surname and verified heir status within the Bennett family's financial registration. According to the documentation we received, your son is no longer a qualifying heir. Jessica blinked. That's ridiculous. His biological father is Mark Bennett. That hasn't changed. Ma'am, the voice said softly, the trust doesn't operate on biological assumption alone. It operates on recorded structure. Your son's legal disassociation, including the name change and signed waiver, altered his position. The system now reflects that he voluntarily relinquished his claim. Jessica's voice cracked. That wasn't meant to affect this. It was just symbolic. There was a pause again. The voice lowered. Trust law rarely deals in symbolism, ma'am. She hung up without a thank you, without a goodbye. Get your dad on the phone, she barked to Brian. I don't think. Now. Brian opened his messages. Mark hadn't texted him in a week. Not since the name change announcement. The silence was heavy. Too heavy to break with a phone call. Jessica grabbed her laptop and typed furiously. Mark's reply came 5 minutes later. Not a call. Not a message. An email. No subject line. Just a PDF attached. Brian's sign name change form. Clear. Legal. Timestamped. Below it, one sentence. Initiated by your son. Confirmed by your encouragement. That was it. No greeting. No closing. Just a surgical slice with the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Jessica slammed the laptop shut. Brian just sat there. I didn't know this would affect school, he muttered. Jessica didn't answer. She was staring at the corner of the screen. At the name in the document. Brian Langston. She remembered the night they first talked about changing it. Brian had come home angry after a fight with Mark. Some petty disagreement about curfews or grades or the way Mark didn't show up for one of his games. I don't even want his name anymore, Brian had spat. Chad's done more for me this year than he ever did. Jessica, wine glass in hand, nodded slowly. You don't have to keep it, sweetheart. It had felt like support back then. Empowerment. Now it felt like a fuse. And the explosion had just begun. Because school was only the first cost. And legacies don't do refunds. The envelope came printed on thick ivory cardstock, the kind reserved for donor galas and private auctions, not meetings with trust managers. Jessica assumed it was a mistake at first, maybe a duplicate notice from St. Lowell's parent fundraising committee. But when she flipped it over and saw the raised seal, the Bennett Educational Legacy Trust, her stomach turned. Inside, a single invitation. You are formally invited to attend the transition meeting introducing the new oversight trustee for Brian Langston's educational inheritance. Date: next Thursday. Time: 9 a.m. Location: Penhist Financial Group, Trust Division, 18th floor. Attendees: guardian parties, trustee appointee, trust compliance officer. Jessica read it 3 times, each pass more defensive than the last. Inheritance, she muttered. Why would they need a meeting for this? Chad looked up from his phone. Isn't the trust just frozen or something? No, not frozen. Transferred. Her voice was clipped. She tossed the invitation onto the counter. It's a formality. We'll go, straighten things out. Get someone sensible to look at this. Chad nodded, but not confidently. Jessica arrived 15 minutes early, Chad in tow, dressed like he was expecting brunch afterward. She wore a dark gray blazer, a silk blouse with pearl buttons, and heels that clicked a little too loudly on the marble floors. Pinhust was all glass and metal, with furniture that looked like it was allergic to comfort. The receptionist took their names, asked for IDs, and gestured to a small conference room with frosted doors. Please wait inside. The trustee will join you shortly. Jessica took the seat at the head of the table. Chad sat beside her, tapping aimlessly at his smartwatch. There was a clock on the wall. They stared at it for 10 long minutes. At 9 o'clock sharp, the door opened. A woman stepped in. Jessica turned, ready to offer a cool smile and a firm handshake, until she saw her. Tall, composed, hair pinned back with surgical precision, slim folder in one hand, tablet in the other. Elise Carrington. Jessica's stomach didn't just drop. It folded. Elise paused in the doorway, scanned the room once, then stepped forward with a faint, unreadable smile. Mrs. Langston. Mr. Langston. Thank you for being on time. Jessica forced a smile. I'm sorry, I thought that I'd retired? Elise offered, her voice cool and clear. I transitioned to independent trust governance last year. Your ex-husband's estate tapped my office for future oversight. Jessica tried to mask the panic crawling up her spine. Elise Carrington hadn't been just a compliance officer. She was the one who uncovered Jessica's fabricated travel receipts during the divorce mediation. She'd cross-referenced hotel loyalty points against expense logs and found 2 unexplained weekends in Palm Springs, where Jessica wasn't supposed to be at the time. It nearly blew up her asset claim. Jessica had called it a clerical error. Elise hadn't bought it then, and she sure as hell wasn't buying any smiles now. Elise took her seat across the table and opened her folder with military neatness. I'm here today to formalize the oversight transition resulting from the activation of Clause 14D. She turned to Chad briefly. I understand you're the new spouse. Chad cleared his throat. Yes, just here for support. I see. Elise tapped her tablet. Let the record show that guardian access has been revoked. As of today, the trust no longer recognizes Brian Langston as a qualifying beneficiary. He is categorized under removed voluntary clause activation. Jessica blinked. You make it sound like we asked for this. Elise looked at her directly for the first time. Mrs. Langston, your son voluntarily signed the name change form. You were present, encouraging it, smiling. We have it on record. You posted it publicly with celebration hashtags. Chad glanced at Jessica. Maybe we should talk about. Elise raised a hand slightly. There is no appeal process for this clause. The structure is irrevocable. My only task here is to oversee the redirection of remaining funds, where applicable, and ensure compliance with the amended lineage protocols. Jessica's voice dropped half an octave. But Brian is still his son. And yet, Elise said evenly, he chose another name, another legal identity. That carries consequences. Jessica sat back, eyes narrowing. This feels personal. Elise didn't blink. It's not. But for what it's worth, I do remember you. And I remember the travel logs. Chad looked between them, confused. What travel logs? Jessica shot him a warning glare, but Elise was already closing her folder. This meeting is concluded. You'll receive the official transition memo within 48 hours. If you have questions, direct them to the trust legal department, not to me. I don't entertain appeals. She stood, straightened her jacket, then looked back once. I suggest you talk to your son. He may not understand what he gave up, but you should. And with that, she left. Jessica didn't speak for a full minute. Neither did Chad. Until finally, he leaned in and whispered, "What the hell did you do during your divorce?" The follow-up meeting wasn't optional. Elise had scheduled it herself. For documentation purposes, the email said, the kind of bureaucratic language that sounds soft but carries the full weight of a hammer drop. Jessica arrived with Brian this time. No Chad. He'd suddenly grown allergic to paperwork ever since Elise's stare made his spine shrink 2 inches. They were escorted into a smaller conference room, one with no view, no windows, and no coffee tray. Just a long table, 3 chairs, and a mounted screen on the wall. Brian slumped into the seat farthest from Elise, headphones still hanging around his neck, hair unbrushed, hoodie zipped halfway up to his chin. He looked less like a teenager with a trust and more like a kid who had slept through homeroom and woke up mid-midterm. Elise entered without knocking, sat down across from him. No folder this time, just a tablet and a click pen. "Brian," she said evenly, "do you understand what the name change form you signed last week actually meant?" He blinked at her. "It was just a form. I thought it was, like, symbolic. You know? I didn't think it had anything to do with money." Elise tapped once on the screen in front of her. The screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying the header of the form. Legal heir reclassification and surname disassociation declaration. She turned the screen off again, then folded her hands. "That document is not symbolic. It's a recorded, notarized legal form that alters your inheritance status under the Bennett Trust." Brian shifted in his seat. Jessica spoke up, tone sharpening. "He's a minor. He can't legally waive something like that." Elise didn't even look at her. "Actually, he's 17. And under the terms of this specific trust, drafted in part with international compliance law, he's old enough to make this decision independently, provided there's no evidence of coercion or mental incapacity." Jessica scoffed. "He didn't know what he was signing. He didn't even read it." "That's not a legal defense," Elise said flatly, "especially when the signing was witnessed, documented, and, yes, recorded." Jessica froze. "You recorded it?" Elise turned her tablet so it faced the screen. With a tap, the room filled with audio. Brian's voice, shaky but clear. "Yeah, I want to take my stepdad's name. I'm cool with giving up whatever comes with the old one. It's not about that." A notary's voice. "You understand this is a permanent decision?" Brian again. "Yeah, I don't care." Jessica's jaw clenched. This was at the brunch. Elise nodded. "Your ex-husband had the foresight to bring documentation and to record the environment. No one forced Brian. No threats. No emotional duress. Just champagne, laughter, and a public declaration that you and your husband treated like a gender reveal party." Brian sank lower in his chair. Jessica crossed her arms. "You're trying to punish him. To punish me." Now Elise looked at her. "No, I'm executing the terms of a legal document. The punishment, if any, was self-administered." She turned to Brian again. "Softer now. You chose a name. That's your right. But names carry weight in legacy law. They're not just letters. They define lines, permissions, access. The moment you walked away from the name Bennett, legally, you walked away from the rights it carried. And rights aren't feelings. They're contracts." Jessica's voice dropped. "He's just a kid." Elise stood. "And that's exactly why this meeting is happening. So that no one walks away thinking this was a misunderstanding. Or a trick. Or something they can reverse with an apology." She looked at Brian one more time. "This wasn't about punishing anyone. But now it's about protecting the integrity of a structure that existed before you were even born. Your name opened doors. You had the key. And you handed it back." Brian's lips moved, but no words came out. Jessica reached for his hand, but he pulled it back. Elise walked to the door, pausing only once. "I'll issue the final paperwork this week. Any future disputes will be dismissed under clause irreversibility." Then she opened the door and left them in a room full of silence they'd built themselves. The silence came slow, like a leak in a pipe you don't notice until the floor starts to warp. At first, it was just one missing birthday invite. Jessica assumed it got lost in the mail. Her cousin Margot had always been disorganized. Surely it wasn't intentional. Then another event passed. Then another. A graduation party. A retirement dinner. Her niece's engagement brunch. Each time, no invite. No group text. No call. She noticed her family group chat was quieter now. The chatter didn't stop. It just moved. Somewhere she wasn't. And when she finally messaged, asking, "Hey, is the shower still on for Alicia?" the only reply came from her sister. "Oh, sorry, Jess. We thought you were busy." Busy? Busy losing ground, maybe. It wasn't just the social shifts. The financial ones had teeth. She'd been planning to pass the family lake house to Brian. She told herself it was for legacy. But truthfully, it was to maintain some sort of tie to the Bennett name. Some fragment of the old world she didn't technically belong to anymore. But now, the house was gone. One Monday morning, she received an alert from the county assessor's office. Routine update. Property 1113, Lakeshore Drive had been transferred. She assumed it was a scam, until she opened the county clerk portal and saw the truth in clean, uncaring Arial font. New title holder, Ancestral Asset Preservation Fund Incorporated. She clicked through the trust records. The fund was real. Registered. Nonprofit. Established 4 months prior. Trustee of record, Elise Carrington. The mission statement? to ensure that legacy properties tied to historical family trusts remain under stewardship aligned with original lineage. Jessica felt something rupture behind her eyes. She called Elisa's office. No answer. She emailed. Attached their past meeting transcripts. Claimed ambiguity. Emotional duress. Misunderstanding. Even dropped the phrase, targeted erasure. A reply came 2 days later from a compliance officer, not Elise. One line. All transitions were executed under binding clauses pre-approved by both parties post-divorce. No action will be taken. This file is closed. Jessica filed a formal complaint with Pinhest's internal review committee. They dismissed it within 48 hours. Included a copy of the name change document. Brian's signature, clear as ever. Hers, too, from the post-brunch social media frenzy. Meanwhile, Brian wasn't himself. He stopped going to the gym with Chad. Stopped asking to borrow the car. The Xbox stayed powered down. His bedroom light would be on at 3 a.m., but when Jessica knocked, he'd just say, "I'm fine," through the door, always without opening it. Chad tried once, suggested they all go to a baseball game like old times. Brian shrugged. "Can't sit in those seats anymore," he muttered. Chad didn't ask what he meant, but Jessica knew. The box seats were part of a family benefit pool tied to the trust. The Legacy Lounge, they used to call it. Not for Langston's. Jessica caught Chad checking old photos sometimes, ones from before the name change. She noticed the way he hesitated when Brian walked into a room, unsure if a joke would land, unsure if he was even supposed to try anymore. This was not the proud, public family they'd built in Facebook posts and catered brunches. This was something colder, quieter, something no hashtag could bandage. One morning, Jessica found Brian sitting at the dining table, flipping through a brochure from a state university. It wasn't one of his top schools. Not even close. She said, gently, "I thought you were aiming higher." He didn't look up, just said, "I'm aiming realistic." She reached out to touch his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't acknowledge it either. "What happened at that brunch?" she whispered. "You didn't know what it meant. You were just angry." He finally looked up. "I was angry, and you were proud of it." She had no response to that, because it was true. And now, every locked gate, every muted thread, every cold reply from an administrator was a reminder that pride might have been louder than legacy, but it sure as hell didn't last as long. It was a gray afternoon in early spring, the kind where the air smells like thawing dirt and forgotten intentions. Mark was in his garage, elbow deep in an old toolbox, sorting screws into labeled jars like it mattered. It didn't, but he liked the order of it. Like that, here, things only moved if you moved them. He didn't hear Brian walk up at first. Just a presence. A pause in the hum of the outside world. Then, "Hey." Mark didn't turn. "Garage is open." That usually means come in. Brian stepped forward, hands buried in his sweatshirt pocket, shoes scuffed, eyes heavier than a 17-year-old's should ever be. They stood in silence for a few beats. Mark kept sorting. Small bolts, then hex nuts, then plastic anchors. "I didn't know it would mean all this," Brian finally said. Mark looked up. Not angry, not smug, just still. "What did you think it meant?" he asked. Brian shrugged. "I don't know. Just a statement. That I was sick of the tension. Of being in the middle all the time. Chad was always around. You were distant." "I was distant," Mark repeated. Not a question, just acknowledgement. Brian rubbed the back of his neck. It felt like picking a side. "I thought maybe picking one would make everything easier." Mark put the jar down, wiped his hands on a rag, walked over and leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "And now?" he asked. Brian didn't answer right away. "Then, the school stuff. The trust. The house. The invites. I thought those were just things. But it's like everyone moved on and didn't tell me." Mark nodded slowly. "You wanted to leave behind my name," he said quietly. "So I left behind what came with it." Brian winced. "I didn't know it was all tied together." "It always is," Mark said. "You just didn't see the knots until they pulled tight." There was a long silence. Not angry. Not awkward. Just heavy. "Can it be reversed?" Brian finally asked. Mark didn't flinch. "No." Brian's voice cracked a little. "Not even with a lawyer?" "You can change your name again, sure," Mark said. "But the trust doesn't care about apologies. It cares about decisions. And contracts. The clauses that were triggered, they were designed that way. I didn't build a structure that reacts to feelings. I built one that reacts to action." Brian looked at the floor. "So that's it." Mark nodded. "That's what legacy is. It's not about who hugs you more. It's about what you protect and what you walk away from." Brian's voice was small. "I didn't think you'd let me go like that." Mark looked at him, really looked at him. "I didn't let you go," he said. I respected your choice. That's what fathers do. Brian's shoulders fell. Not in rebellion, not in defeat, just gravity. The kind that comes when you realize the ground you thought you were standing on was actually just paper. Signed. Witnessed. Filed. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. You ever regret it? Mark raised an eyebrow. Letting you choose? No, Brian said, eyes flicking up. The clause. Mark exhaled slowly. Every day I prayed I'd never have to use it. He didn't add, but I did. He didn't have to. Brian stood there for a second longer, then nodded, once, and walked back into the driveway. His gait slower, less certain, as if every step had started costing him something. Mark watched him go, then turned back to the workbench, and began putting the bolts into the wrong jars. The hall smelled like polished oak and old money. Every spring, the family hosted what they called the archive ceremony, a tradition started 4 generations ago by Thomas Bennett, a railway tycoon with a fondness for etched brass and family pride. What began as a simple dinner had evolved into an annual event where names were engraved, histories updated, and legacies formally recognized in front of trustees, scholars, and blood. The crowd that gathered this year filled every chair in the main hall of the Bennett Heritage Library. High ceilings, stained glass, a mural of the original family tree spread across one wall, branches etched in copper, each name engraved in brass beneath hand-painted leaves. Mark arrived alone. No +1. No escort. Just a dark suit, polished shoes, and the quiet authority of a man who knew exactly what line had been drawn and who drew it. The crowd hushed as the archivist stepped to the podium. We begin, she said, with the additions and removals per this year's legacy review. A large cloth draped the new plaque mounted beside the mural. One of the junior historians pulled it away. Gasps weren't common at these events. The audience skewed old, composed, and practiced in the art of feigned indifference. But this time, there was a ripple. The plaque, polished bronze, freshly engraved, listed the family's newest generation of direct line beneficiaries. 3 names, all marked with dates of verification. And a 4th line, blank except for one designation. Vacated, name relinquished. There was no asterisk, no footnote, no poetic reframe. Just absence. An absence that screamed louder than any entry could have. Elise Carrington stood at the edge of the room. She wasn't in a suit this time. She wore a deep navy dress, modest and sharp, with a small silver pin shaped like an anchor. When the archivist nodded, Mark stepped forward. He didn't approach the microphone, just handed it to her. No words, no speech, just a gesture that said, "This voice matters more." Elise took the mic with the ease of someone used to delivering unpleasant truths wrapped in linen etiquette. As trustee, she began, it's my honor to announce the formal establishment of the Stewart Foundation. This initiative will support heirs who not only bear the family name, but uphold its intent. She paused. Let that distinction settle in. A legacy is not a birthright, she continued. It is a decision, one that is lived, protected, and, when necessary, defended. The room remained quiet, but the undertow was unmistakable. A line had been drawn, and it wasn't just ink on bronze. In the back row, half-shadowed behind one of the Corinthian columns, Jessica sat with her arms folded. She wasn't on the invite list. She knew that. The only reason they didn't escort her out was because no one wanted a scene. That, and the fact that her presence no longer mattered. Her heels clicked against the floor once, reflexive, agitated. Next to her sat Brian. Hair longer now, face thinner, dressed in a blazer 2 sizes too big, a holdover from a different kind of event. His eyes stayed locked on the plaque. He didn't fidget, didn't blink much, just stared. When Elise finished, polite applause followed. Brief, measured. Mark didn't clap. He stood still, then walked back to his seat without acknowledging the row in the back. Jessica leaned in, whispering something to Brian. He shook his head once. Whatever she said, it didn't land. Because the silence between him and the front of that room wasn't about discomfort. It was about permanence. Later, people gathered for canapes and pleasantries in the foyer. Mark stepped outside, standing beneath the stone arch engraved with the words, "That which endures must be chosen daily." Brian watched him through the glass doors, but didn't follow. Jessica touched his arm. "He didn't erase you," she murmured. Brian didn't look at her, just stared at the empty space on the plaque. "No," he said quietly. "I did that part myself." And then he walked the other way, into a legacy he thought he understood, but that now walked on without him. No footsteps, no return address, just the hollow echo of a name he gave away, and the inheritance that never looked back.